My son's bride spit in my face at the wedding, right in front of 200 guests. My son looked at me and said, "You deserved that." I said nothing. I turned around, walked out of that reception hall, and drove home alone. The next morning, I made one phone call. And when they came back from their honeymoon 3 days later, expecting to move into my house, they found the front door locked, their suitcases on the porch, and a man in a charcoal gray suit sitting in my living room with a stack of papers that would unravel everything they thought they knew about their future. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button. Let me tell you how I got to that moment, because what happened next changed everything. My name is Alina Parsons. I'm 68 years old. I raised my son, Kevin, alone after his father walked out when Kevin was 4. No child support. No alimony. No help from anyone. I worked double shifts as a nurse for 27 years, saved every penny I could, and bought our little house in Ashfield, Connecticut, outright by the time I was 53. That house was my cathedral. Every nail, every coat of paint, every flower in that garden represented a sacrifice I'd made so Kevin could have stability. Kevin was a good boy growing up. Quiet, studious, a little too eager to please. He got a degree in business administration, landed a decent job at an insurance company, and for a while I thought my sacrifices had paid off. Then he met Vanessa. Vanessa Torres came into Kevin's life like a storm that looked beautiful from a distance. Charming when she wanted to be, sharp-tongued when she didn't, and absolutely certain that the world owed her something spectacular. She was 26 when they started dating. Kevin was 31. From the beginning, something about her unsettled me. It wasn't jealousy. I'd been waiting for Kevin to find someone. I wanted grandchildren. I wanted him to be happy, but Vanessa had a way of isolating him from everyone who loved him. Within 6 months, Kevin stopped calling me on Sundays. Within a year, he'd missed Thanksgiving and Christmas. When I finally met Vanessa at a restaurant 8 months into their relationship, she looked me up and down like I was something stuck to the bottom of her shoe. "So you're the famous Alina," she said, not extending her hand. "Kevin talks about you constantly. It's a little much, honestly." Kevin laughed nervously. "She's joking, Mom." She wasn't joking. Over the next 2 years, I watched Vanessa systematically dismantle my relationship with my son. Every time I called, she answered his phone. Every time I suggested a visit, there was a conflict. Every piece of advice I offered was filtered through Vanessa's interpretation and fed back to Kevin as criticism. "Your mother thinks I'm not good enough for you," she'd tell him, loud enough for me to hear through the phone. "Mom thinks you should have gotten that promotion," she'd twist my words. "Your mother called again. Does she not have friends her own age?" By the time Kevin proposed, I barely recognized him. The thoughtful, gentle boy I'd raised had been replaced by a man who flinched when his fiancée raised her voice and apologized for things that weren't his fault. I tried. God knows I tried to talk to him. "Kevin," I said during one of our rare lunches together, "I just want to make sure you're happy. Marriage is forever. Are you sure she's the one?" He set down his fork. "Mom, Vanessa told me you'd do this." "Do what?" "Try to talk me out of it. She said you'd never accept any woman I chose because you want to control my life." "That's not what I—" "Mom, I'm marrying her. You can either support us or not, but if you can't be happy for me, maybe you shouldn't come to the wedding." Those words cut deeper than anything Vanessa had ever said, because they came from him. I went to the wedding. Of course I went. He was my only child. The ceremony was at the Greenfield Estate, a sprawling venue with manicured gardens and a reception hall that could hold 300 people. Vanessa had invited 200 of her closest friends, family members, and social media followers. I was given a seat in the 4th row. The mother of the groom, seated behind Vanessa's college roommates. I said nothing. I smiled. I clapped when they kissed. I told myself it didn't matter where I sat as long as Kevin was happy. The reception was where everything fell apart. I was standing by the dessert table, trying to stay out of the way, when Vanessa's mother, Gloria, approached me. Gloria was a large woman with opinions to match, and she'd been drinking champagne since the ceremony. "Alina," she said, swaying slightly, "I hear you tried to stop this wedding." "That's not true, Gloria. I just wanted Kevin to be sure." "You wanted him to stay your little boy forever. That's what Vanessa says." "Vanessa says a lot of things that aren't accurate." Gloria's eyes narrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I'd rather not discuss this at my son's wedding." But Gloria wasn't finished. She grabbed my arm, hard enough to leave a mark, and leaned in close. "You need to accept that you're not the most important woman in Kevin's life anymore. Vanessa is his family now. You're just history." I gently removed her hand from my arm. "I'm his mother. That doesn't expire." The commotion had attracted attention. Vanessa materialized beside her mother, still in her wedding dress, veil flowing behind her like a white flag that signaled anything but surrender. "What's going on?" Vanessa demanded, looking directly at me. "Nothing," I said. "Gloria and I were just talking." "She was being disrespectful," Gloria announced, "saying things about you." I didn't say anything about Vanessa. But Vanessa had already made up her mind. Her face twisted into an expression I'd seen before, the one she wore when she'd decided someone needed to be punished. "You know what, Alina?" She stepped closer. "I've been patient with you. I've tolerated your little comments, your judgmental looks, your constant meddling. But this is my day, and I will not let you ruin it." "Vanessa, I haven't done anything. I've been standing here eating cake." "You showed up in that dress." She gestured at my outfit, a modest navy blue dress I'd bought specifically because Vanessa had told me not to wear anything that might draw attention. "You're trying to make a statement." "It's a navy blue dress, Vanessa. It's the most invisible thing I own." "And there it is," she laughed bitterly. "The passive-aggressive martyr routine. Poor Alina, so invisible, so unappreciated." People were gathering now. 200 guests forming a loose circle around us, phones already recording. I could see Kevin pushing through the crowd, his face pale. "Vanessa," I said quietly, "let's not do this here, not in front of everyone." "Why not? You're always so concerned about appearances. Let everyone see the real Alina Parsons. The controlling, manipulative woman who tried to stop her own son's wedding because she couldn't stand the idea of another woman being more important." "That's not what happened. Kevin told me everything. How you begged him not to marry me, how you said I was beneath him, how you—" "I never said you were beneath him. I asked him if he was sure. That's what mothers do." Then she did it. Vanessa pulled back and spit directly in my face. Not accidentally. Not in the heat of a moment where things moved too fast to think. She gathered it deliberately, leaned forward, and spit on me like I was dirt beneath her designer heels. The warm saliva hit my cheek, and for a moment the entire reception hall went silent. 200 guests, champagne glasses frozen mid-sip, mouths hanging open in shock or, worse, in amusement. Then someone laughed. One person. Then another. Then a ripple of nervous, cruel laughter from Vanessa's side of the guest list, the kind of laughter that comes from people who are relieved the target isn't them. "Get out of here, old woman," Gloria shouted from behind her daughter, emboldened by the crowd. "This isn't your party." I wiped my face with the back of my hand and looked at Kevin. My son. My only child. The boy I'd worked double shifts for, the boy I'd read bedtime stories to, the boy I'd held when he cried after his father left. Kevin looked at me, then he looked at Vanessa, then he shrugged. "Mom, you kind of deserved that. You've been trying to sabotage us from the beginning." 200 guests heard my son tell me I deserved to be spit on at his wedding. I stood there for exactly 3 seconds. I counted them. 1, 2, 3. Then I picked up my purse from the table, walked through the crowd of strangers who parted like water around a stone, pushed open the heavy oak doors of the Greenfield estate, and drove home in complete silence. No tears, not yet. The tears would come later in the dark, in the house I'd paid for with decades of my life. But in that moment, something was already happening inside me. The hurt was crystallizing into something else entirely. Something sharp and cold and patient. I had options they didn't know about, resources they'd never bothered to ask about, and a history they'd never cared enough to learn. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I had already picked up my phone. The call lasted 14 minutes. When I hung up, I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. The woman staring back at me didn't look broken. She looked decided. Kevin and Vanessa had planned to move into my house after the honeymoon. That had been the arrangement, the one Kevin had casually announced 3 months before the wedding, like it was already settled. "Vanessa's lease is up in July," he'd said. "We figured we'd stay with you for a while, save up for a down payment on our own place." I'd agreed because I was still trying to be the good mother, the accommodating mother, the mother who didn't want to lose her son entirely. They left for Cancun the morning after the wedding. 3 days of honeymooning on a trip paid for by Vanessa's parents, who apparently had money for luxury vacations, but not for their daughter's financial responsibilities. I used those 3 days wisely. On Monday morning, the man in the charcoal gray suit arrived at my door at precisely 9 o'clock. "Mrs. Parsons?" He shook my hand with the kind of firm, professional grip that immediately communicated competence. "I'm Martin Caldwell. We spoke on the phone Saturday evening." "Please come in, Martin. Coffee." "Thank you." Martin Caldwell was not just any lawyer. He was a specialist in elder law, estate planning, and what he delicately referred to as family restructuring. He'd been recommended to me 5 years ago by my hospital's retirement planning advisor, though I'd never had reason to call him until Vanessa's saliva hit my cheek. We sat in my living room, the same room where Kevin had taken his first steps, and I told Martin everything. The 2 years of isolation, the twisted words, the wedding humiliation, Kevin's betrayal. Martin took notes with a silver pen that moved across his legal pad like a surgeon's scalpel. Precise, unhurried, deadly. "Mrs. Parsons, what are your goals here?" "I want to protect myself and my assets, and I want my son to understand exactly what he's thrown away." "Do they know about the full extent of your financial situation?" I smiled. "Kevin thinks I'm a retired nurse living on a pension and Social Security. He has no idea about anything else." Martin nodded. "Then let's start with what they don't know." What Kevin didn't know could fill a book. He didn't know that his father, the man who walked out when Kevin was 4, had died in a car accident 6 years ago. He didn't know because Kevin had never asked about his father, and I'd never volunteered the information. But here's what mattered. Kevin's father, Robert Parsons, had spent the decades after leaving us building a surprisingly successful auto parts distribution company in Michigan. Guilt, probably, or maybe just competence, applied to something other than parenting. When Robert died without a will, intestate succession laws meant everything went to his only next of kin. Not Kevin, me, because Robert and I had never actually divorced. He'd left, yes, disappeared, but the paperwork was never finalized. Under Connecticut law, I was still his legal spouse. Robert's estate was worth $1.4 million after taxes and legal fees. I'd quietly invested every penny with a financial advisor named Helen Woodruff, who had turned that money into $2.1 million over 6 years through conservative growth strategies. Combined with my pension, Social Security, the paid-off house worth $680,000, and my own retirement savings of $340,000, my total net worth was approximately $3.1 million. Kevin thought I was scraping by. Martin reviewed all of this with methodical precision. "And your current will leaves everything to Kevin." It did. Past tense. That's why you're here. We spent the rest of Monday restructuring my entire estate. The new will directed the bulk of my assets to a charitable trust supporting nursing scholarships and children's education programs. Kevin was removed as primary beneficiary. Vanessa, who had been added as a secondary beneficiary at Kevin's request 6 months ago, was removed entirely. On Tuesday, I called a locksmith. "I need all the locks changed on my house. Front door, back door, garage entry, and the basement. Can you do it today?" "We can be there by 2. "Perfect." While I waited for the locksmith, I went through the guest bedroom where Kevin and Vanessa's things had already been moved in anticipation of their post-honeymoon arrival. 3 suitcases of clothes, a box of kitchen gadgets Vanessa insisted she'd need, and several shopping bags full of wedding gifts they'd had shipped to my address. I packed everything neatly and placed it on the front porch. Not thrown, not damaged, carefully stacked the way a nurse organizes supplies, precise and impersonal. On Wednesday, I received a phone call from Martin that added another layer to the situation. "Mrs. Parsons, I did some background research on your daughter-in-law as part of our due diligence. And Vanessa Torres has a pattern. Before Kevin, she was engaged to another man, a dentist named Paul Herrera. That engagement ended when Paul's mother discovered Vanessa had been using Paul's credit cards without his knowledge. She'd racked up almost $60,000 in debt." $60,000. Paul's family hired an investigator. They found she'd also forged his signature on a home equity line of credit application. The engagement ended, and Paul's family threatened prosecution if she didn't repay the money. She made partial restitution, and the charges were dropped. Does Kevin know about this? Based on our research, no. Vanessa appears to have concealed her prior engagement entirely. Paul Herrera's family signed a non-disclosure agreement as part of the settlement. Can we use this information? We can share it with Kevin. What he does with it is his choice. But Mrs. Parsons, there's more. Go on. Vanessa was also fired from her previous job at a marketing firm for expense report fraud. She was padding her business travel claims by approximately $2,000 per month. The company chose not to prosecute to avoid publicity, but the termination is on record. So she has a history of financial manipulation. A documented pattern. And Mrs. Parsons, I checked Kevin's credit report as part of the estate planning process, since he was a beneficiary. And he has 3 new credit cards opened in the last 8 months, all maxed out. Total balance, $47,000. $2 of the cards list Vanessa as an authorized user. My heart sank, not because of the money, but because it confirmed what I'd feared. Vanessa wasn't just rude. She was systematic. She was draining my son financially while isolating him from the one person who might notice. "Martin, I want you at my house on Thursday morning. They're flying back Wednesday night." "I'll be there at 8. Thursday morning, I made coffee and set out 2 chairs on the front porch. Martin arrived at 8 sharp, briefcase in hand, looking exactly like the kind of man who charges $600 an hour and is worth every penny. At 9:15, Kevin's car pulled into my driveway. I watched through the window as he and Vanessa got out, tanned and smiling, still riding the high of their honeymoon. Their smiles lasted until they noticed the suitcases on the porch. "Mom," Kevin approached the front door and tried his key. It didn't work. He tried again. "Mom, the lock isn't working." I opened the door myself, but only wide enough to stand in the frame. "Good morning, Kevin, Vanessa. I hope Cancun was lovely." "What's going on? Why are our things outside? My key doesn't work." "That's because the locks have been changed." Vanessa pushed forward. "Eleanor, what is this? Some kind of joke?" "No joke. Kevin, Vanessa, I'd like you to meet Martin Caldwell. He's my attorney." Martin stood and extended his hand with professional courtesy. "Good morning. Perhaps we should all sit down and discuss the situation." "What situation?" Kevin's voice was rising. "Mom, you can't lock us out. We had an agreement." "We had an informal understanding, based on the assumption that you'd treat me with basic human decency. That assumption proved incorrect at approximately 7:45 p.m. last Saturday." Vanessa crossed her arms. "You're seriously doing this because of a little argument at the wedding?" "A little argument?" I stepped onto the porch and faced her directly. "You spit in my face in front of 200 people. Your mother told me to get out, and my son told me I deserved it." Kevin ran his hand through his hair. "Mom, emotions were running high. It was a stressful day." "It was your wedding day, and you chose to humiliate your mother in front of everyone you know." Martin cleared his throat. Perhaps we should discuss the practical implications. What practical implications? Vanessa demanded. Martin opened his briefcase. Mrs. Parsons has made several significant decisions regarding her estate and living arrangements that affect both of you. Estate, Kevin went pale. Mom, what did you do? I updated my will. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. I could hear birds singing in the garden I'd planted with my own hands while Kevin was at school and Vanessa was still a stranger. Updated it how? Vanessa asked, her voice suddenly careful. Kevin is no longer my primary beneficiary. Kevin sat down heavily on the porch step. Mom, you can't be serious. I'm completely serious. Martin, please explain. Martin pulled out the relevant documents. Mrs. Parsons has redirected the majority of her estate to charitable organizations, the Ashfield Community Nursing Scholarship Fund, the Children's Education Foundation of Connecticut, and a local women's shelter. How much are we talking about? Vanessa asked directly. I watched her face carefully. Why does that matter, Vanessa? I thought you were marrying Kevin for love, not for his mother's money. Of course I married him for love. Mrs. Parsons' total estate, Martin continued, including this property, investment accounts, pension benefits, and inherited assets, is valued at approximately $3.1 million. Kevin's mouth fell open. Vanessa grabbed the porch railing like she might collapse. 3.1 million, Kevin whispered. Mom, how? You're a retired nurse. I'm a retired nurse who worked double shifts for 27 years, lived below her means, invested wisely, and inherited your father's estate when he died 6 years ago. My father is dead. He died in 2018, a car accident in Michigan. Since we were never legally divorced, his estate came to me. Kevin looked like the ground had opened beneath him. You never told me. You never asked about him, not once in 30 years. But $3 million, and you were going to leave it all to me. I was, past tense. Mom, please, Kevin stood up. I know what happened at the wedding was wrong. I should have stood up for you. I should have. You should have done a lot of things, Kevin, but you didn't, and now I've made different plans. Vanessa had been doing mental math. I could practically see the calculations scrolling behind her eyes. Eleanor, let's be rational about this. You're upset, and you have every right to be, but changing your entire estate plan over one incident. One incident? I repeated. Vanessa, in 2 years, you've systematically turned my son against me. You've isolated him from his family. You've controlled his social life, his phone, his finances. That's not true. And speaking of finances, I turned to Martin. Martin pulled out another folder. During our due diligence, we discovered some concerning information. What kind of information? Vanessa's voice went flat. Prior to your relationship with Kevin, you were engaged to Dr. Paul Herrera of Hartford. The blood drained from Vanessa's face, so fast I thought she might faint. That engagement ended, Martin continued, after Dr. Herrera's family discovered you had accumulated $60,000 in unauthorized charges on his credit cards and forged his signature on a home equity line of credit application. Those records are sealed. The court records may be sealed. The facts are not. Kevin was staring at his wife. Vanessa, is this true? It was a misunderstanding. Paul's family blew everything out of proportion. A misunderstanding that required partial restitution and a non-disclosure agreement, Martin asked. Kevin, Vanessa turned to her husband with pleading eyes. That was a different time in my life. I was young and I made mistakes. You were 23, Martin noted, 3 years before you met Kevin. There's also the matter of your termination from Whitfield Marketing, I added. Vanessa's composure cracked. How do you know about that? Expense report fraud. Approximately $2,000 per month in padded travel claims. Kevin stood up. Vanessa, what the hell is going on? What else haven't you told me? Kevin, your mother is trying to destroy our marriage. Can't you see that? My mother is telling me things you should have told me before I married you. It's irrelevant, ancient history. Then perhaps the current history is more relevant, Martin interjected. Kevin, are you aware that you currently have $47,000 in credit card debt across 3 accounts opened in the last 8 months? Kevin's face went blank. What? I have 1 credit card with a $3,000 limit. You have 3. 2 of them list Vanessa as an authorized user. The silence that followed was devastating. I watched my son process the realization that the woman he'd married 3 days ago had been stealing from him for months. Vanessa, Kevin's voice was barely audible. Is that true? She said nothing. Her eyes darted between Kevin, Martin, and me like a cornered animal calculating escape routes. It was for the wedding, she finally said. Do you have any idea how much a wedding costs? The venue alone was $15,000. I thought your parents paid for the venue. They paid for part of it. I had to cover the rest. With credit cards you opened in my name. In our names, we're a couple, Kevin. What's yours is mine. You weren't my wife when you opened those accounts. You were my girlfriend committing fraud. Vanessa turned on me with fury. This is exactly what you wanted, isn't it, Alina? To poison him against me, to break us up so you can keep your precious son all to yourself. I shook my head. Vanessa, I don't want Kevin all to myself. I want Kevin to have all the information he needs to make good decisions, something you've been preventing for 2 years. I love him. You love what you think he's worth. And now that you know I'm worth $3.1 million, you love the idea of him even more. That landed like a slap. Vanessa's eyes filled with tears, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of rage. Kevin, she said through gritted teeth, are you going to let your mother talk to me like this, on our honeymoon week, after everything I've done for us? Kevin was sitting with his head in his hands. When he looked up, I saw something I hadn't seen in years. My son, the real Kevin, the boy who used to think carefully about things before acting. Mom, he said quietly, I need to talk to Vanessa alone. Of course, I stood. Martin and I will be inside. Take all the time you need. As Martin and I walked into the house, he leaned toward me. That went better than expected. It's not over yet. She'll try to turn this around. You think he'll stay with her? I think Kevin has spent 2 years being told what to think. He needs time to remember how to think for himself. We waited 45 minutes. Through the window, I could see them arguing. Vanessa was gesturing wildly, crying, shouting. Kevin was sitting very still, which I recognized as his processing mode. He'd done the same thing as a child when faced with difficult information. Go quiet, go inward, then emerge with a decision. When they finally came inside, Kevin's eyes were red but his jaw was set. Mom, we need to talk, just us. Vanessa grabbed his arm. Kevin, we agreed. We didn't agree on anything. Vanessa, wait outside. I'm your wife. Wait outside. She left, slamming the door behind her hard enough to rattle the windows. Kevin sat down across from me at the kitchen table. The same table where I'd helped him with homework, celebrated his birthdays, and told him his father wasn't coming back. Is it all true, everything your lawyer said? Every word. I can show you the documentation. The credit cards. $47,000. He covered his face with his hands. Mom, I'm so sorry. For which part? For all of it, for the wedding, for what I said, for letting her treat you the way she did, for not listening when you tried to warn me. Kevin, I didn't do any of this to punish you. I did it to wake you up. I know, his voice broke. I know that now. What are you going to do? He was quiet for a long time. I don't know, she's my wife. We've been married for 4 days. You've been married for 4 days to someone who's been defrauding you for 8 months, and who apparently did the same thing to her previous fiancé. How do I know she won't change? How do you know she will? He stared at the table. What do you want me to do, Mom? I want you to make your own decision, not the one I want, not the one Vanessa wants, the one that's right for you. And the will, the money. That's separate. Kevin, the money was never the point. The point is that I raised you to be better than what I saw at that wedding." "You're right." He stood up. "Can I have a few days to figure this out?" "Where will you stay?" "I'll get a hotel room. I need to be away from everyone, Vanessa included." "Your suitcase is on the porch." He managed a weak smile. "You packed it neatly." "I'm a nurse. We're organized." He picked up his bag, then turned back. "Mom, I love you. I should have said that a long time ago." "I love you too, Kevin. I never stopped." I watched him drive away with Vanessa chasing after the car, screaming his name. He didn't stop. Martin finished his coffee and stood. "What happens now?" "Now we wait. Kevin needs to figure this out himself. And if he goes back to her, then he goes back with his eyes open. That's all I ever wanted." The next 2 weeks were the longest of my life. Kevin called me 3 times. Short conversations where he asked careful questions about his father's death, about the money, about what I'd observed in Vanessa that he'd been too close to see. On the 14th day, he showed up at my door, alone. "I filed for an annulment," he said. I opened the door wide. "Come inside." He sat at the kitchen table, thinner than he'd been 2 weeks ago, with dark circles under his eyes. She admitted everything. The credit cards, the previous engagement, the expense fraud. She said she thought marrying me would fix her life. "And what did you say?" I said fixing her life wasn't my job. It was hers. I poured him coffee. "That's the smartest thing you've said in 2 years." "Mom, I need to tell you something." "What is it?" "The debt, the $47,000. I can't pay it. The annulment lawyer says Vanessa is legally responsible for the fraudulent accounts, but it could take months to resolve. In the meantime, my credit is destroyed." "I know. I'm not asking you for money." "I know that too. I just want to know if I can come home, not permanently, just until I get back on my feet." I studied my son's face. He looked exhausted, humiliated, and genuinely sorry. But sorry wasn't enough. Not yet. "You can come home on conditions." "What conditions?" I pulled out a contract. Martin had helped me draft it during the 2 weeks Kevin was gone, because I'd known this moment would come. 90 days. You pay rent of $400 per month once you're earning income. You attend counseling to work through why you allowed someone to isolate you from your family. You contribute to household chores. And you treat this house and everyone in it with respect. He read the contract carefully. "This is fair." "There's one more condition." "What?" "You never, ever side against me when someone treats me with disrespect. I'm your mother. I will always be your mother. And I will never again tolerate being humiliated by someone my son brought into my life." "Mom, I swear on everything." "Don't swear, just sign." He signed. Kevin started working at a building supply warehouse 3 days later. Not the career he'd envisioned, but honest work that paid the bills. He found a counselor through the hospital's employee assistance program and went every Thursday evening. He also started asking me questions, real questions, about my life, my career, my finances, my plans for the future. For the first time in years, we had genuine conversations over dinner. One evening, about 6 weeks into his stay, he found me in the living room going over paperwork with Helen Woodruff, my financial advisor, on a video call. "Mom, I don't want to interrupt, but..." He trailed off, staring at the investment portfolio summary on my laptop screen. "Kevin, this is Helen. She's managed my investments since your father's estate was settled." Helen smiled from the screen. "Hello, Kevin. Your mother is one of my most disciplined clients." Kevin leaned closer to the screen. "Mom, these numbers, the portfolio growth alone is..." "Conservative and sustainable," Helen finished. "Your mother understood early on that protecting principle is more important than chasing returns." He sat down slowly. "You've been doing this for 6 years, building all of this." "Building security," I corrected, "so that I never have to depend on anyone, not even you." That hit him. I could see it. "Mom, I was so wrong about everything." "You were wrong about me. More importantly, you were wrong about yourself. You're better than what Vanessa convinced you to be." The annulment was finalized 8 weeks later. Vanessa had contested it initially, but when Martin presented the evidence of fraud and the credit card documentation, her attorney advised her to settle. She was ordered to assume full responsibility for the fraudulent debts and was barred from contacting Kevin directly. I later learned that Paul Herrera's family had been in contact with Martin. They were considering reopening their case against Vanessa now that the non-disclosure agreement was arguably void due to her continued pattern of behavior. I let Martin handle that. It wasn't my fight. Kevin moved out exactly on day 90, into a modest one-bedroom apartment 15 minutes from my house. He'd saved enough from his warehouse job for first and last month's rent, and he was already interviewing for positions closer to his field. Before he left, he came into the kitchen where I was making coffee. "Mom, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. When have I ever been anything else? The will, the charitable trust, is that permanent?" I poured 2 cups and sat down across from him. "Kevin, my estate plan reflects my values. Right now, it's structured to support causes I believe in, but wills can be amended." "What would it take?" "Time, trust, consistency. I need to see that the man leaving this house today is the man who shows up a year from now, 5 years from now." "That's fair. I'm not using money to control you, Kevin. I'm using it to protect myself and to make sure my legacy goes where it can do the most good." "I understand." "Do you?" He looked at me, really looked at me. "You spent your whole life taking care of me, and I repaid you by letting someone spit in your face at a wedding. I'll spend the rest of my life earning back what I lost." "You didn't lose anything, Kevin. You just temporarily forgot where to find it." He hugged me then. A real hug, the kind he used to give me when he was small, before the World and Vanessa tours taught him to be ashamed of loving his mother. 3 years passed. Kevin rebuilt his career, starting at that warehouse and working his way into a regional management position. He paid off the remainder of his debts. He continued therapy, and every Sunday, without exception, he came to my house for dinner. He met a woman named Sarah at a financial literacy workshop, of all places. She was a 3rd-grade teacher with kind eyes and a direct way of speaking that reminded me of myself. The first time she came to Sunday dinner, she brought flowers and asked to see my garden. "Kevin told me you planted all of this yourself," Sarah said, kneeling beside my rose bushes. "Over 30 years, I confirmed. "It's beautiful. You must be incredibly patient." "Patience is my greatest talent." She laughed. "Kevin says you're the strongest person he's ever known." "Kevin says that now." She looked at me. "He also told me what happened at his first wedding, all of it, and he said if I ever disrespected you, he'd walk out the door and never look back." He said that. His exact words were, "My mother gave me everything, and I forgot to be grateful. I won't make that mistake again." I had to turn away so she wouldn't see my tears, but they weren't tears of sadness, not anymore. When Kevin proposed to Sarah, he asked for my blessing first. I gave it willingly. Their wedding was small, 40 guests in my backyard garden, under the same trees Kevin had climbed as a child. Sarah wore a simple white dress. Kevin wore a navy suit that reminded me of the one Martin Caldwell had worn the day he changed our lives. And when the officiant asked if anyone objected, Kevin turned to look at me in the front row and smiled. After the ceremony, he found me by the dessert table. "Mom, I have something for you." He handed me an envelope. Inside was a letter, handwritten, 3 pages long. I read the first line and had to stop. "Dear Mom, I'm writing this so you'll always have proof of what I should have said that day at the Greenfield estate." I folded it carefully and put it in my purse. "I'll read it tonight." "There's something else." He pulled out a second envelope. "Sarah and I talked about this, and we want you to know." Inside was a document from their financial planner. Kevin and Sarah had set up an education fund for their future children. They'd named it the Alina Parsons Scholarship. "For your grandchildren," Kevin said, "and for other kids who need help, like you helped me." I looked at my son, standing in my garden on his wedding day, surrounded by the flowers I'd planted and the life I'd built, and I saw the boy I'd raised. The real one. The one who'd been buried under someone else's manipulation, but had finally dug himself free. Kevin. Yes, Mom. I'm amending my will on Monday. He shook his head. You don't have to do that. I know I don't have to. I want to. You've earned it. Sometimes the greatest inheritance you can leave your children isn't money. It's the understanding that love must be earned, respect must be given freely, and the people who raise you deserve better than spit on their faces at a wedding. And sometimes the quietest woman in the room is the one holding all the cards. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.